want to just kick this off. I owe you an apology. I can't believe I did this, but I gave you the wrong term for one of the arguments for the existence of God. So far, I've been giving you three arguments for the existence of God. And the first one has to do with why is there something rather than nothing? And I called that the ontological argument, which in a sense makes sense because ontos means being, and so it's existence or being, and that's what the argument is. Why is there something rather than nothing? But I should have remembered, that that is actually called the cosmological argument. And so the three arguments that I'm giving you are the cosmological argument, and then last week we looked at the teleological argument, which is the argument from design. And then today we're going to look at the anthropological argument, which is the argument from the existence of humanity. And, I have no excuse for not remembering that because Cindy's dad was Dr. Walter Martin, who I'm sure some of you have heard of. He wrote the book, The Kingdom of the Cults, and he was the founder of the Christian Research Institute, where I've worked for the last 34 years. And I sat in his Christian Evidences class 34 years ago, and he laid all this stuff out for me. This is where I first heard these concepts. The cosmological argument, the teleological argument, and the anthropological argument. And and I've taught this many, many times. So, I don't know why I would forget it, except I am getting older. Maybe I have early onset senility. It seems like this has happened to me a lot recently, but I can't remember. So anyway, but there is an ontological argument. Since I mentioned it, I should also address that. I'm not going to be giving that to you, mainly because we're looking at these three arguments for the existence of God in the context of three problems for the worldview of materialism or atheism. Because in the larger context of what we're doing here, this class is looking at worldviews. And as I've explained many times, but for the benefit of those that are here for the first time and to refresh your memory, I will just quickly summarize that this class is looking at what your options are. It's structured as a search for truth. And so we're searching for if there is a purpose and meaning in life. And we're wide open. Our original criteria is that we're not specifying any one particular belief, but we're going to evaluate beliefs. The only way that you can evaluate worldviews, you can't evaluate them scientifically because they go beyond, they're metaphysical, they go beyond the physical testable data. So the only way that you really can, as a starting point, ultimately you evaluate them by the Bible, but you have to get there first, and your starting point is simply logic. Are they consistent? Are they internally consistent, or do they contradict themselves? Are they externally consistent? Do they fit the world, the universe, nature, as we find it? And do they fit humanity as we find human nature? Can people live consistently according to these beliefs? And if any inconsistency comes up in the evaluation of these worldviews, then you have good reason to say, okay, this worldview is crossed out. This worldview is not worthy of my belief. It would be unwise for me to base my life on this worldview. And in approaching it by worldviews rather than individual philosophies and religions, any philosophy or religion that fits under the canopy of that worldview gets ruled out along with the worldview. So you learn how to deal with things according to the big questions, the big issues, and then you don't have to sift through thousands and thousands of religions looking for the truth. And so what we've identified is that there are 6 worldviews that commend themselves to 21st century human beings as plausible, as possibly true. We've already looked at polytheism, the belief that there are many gods, and we found that it is both internally and externally inconsistent. Now we're looking at the worldview of naturalism, which is the worldview that nature is all there is. There is no supernatural realm. The universe is eternal, and it is ultimate reality. And within that worldview of naturalism, there's 2 options that are polar extreme opposites. The first one is materialism, that everything is material, and then the second one is pantheism, that everything is spirit or God or mind or consciousness. So we've been working our way through the worldview of materialism, which is synonymous with atheism, the belief in no spiritual realm whatsoever, no God, that everything is ultimately material. And so far we've seen that it has problems with how did the universe get here in the first place? Because both the second law of thermodynamics, I remember Walter Martin teaching this in that Christian evidences class so many years ago about the second law of thermodynamics. That's where I first heard the term heat death. That the universe is heading toward heat death or a loss of usable energy. So that's a reason why it can't be eternal. And then another reason is the Big Bang Theory itself, that is the prevailing and most supported interpretation of how the universe began, also shows us that the universe is temporal. And when it's properly understood, we realize that that means time, space, matter, energy. Everything began at that point. The Big Bang did not occur in a pre-existing spatial material world. So therefore, there was nothing before there was something. And so you either have something coming from nothing, which I remember Walter Martin saying, that's not possible, or you have a source outside of the realm of the material, God, who is responsible for it. Then last week, we looked at the evidence for design. And you'll have to, if you missed last week, you'll have to go back and watch. We have it on video or audio. I think it's just on video right now. You can watch the class, and we're running 1 week behind. So what's up is usually 2 weeks ago. But you can pick up on the classes that you miss if you just are diligent to keep monitoring for the one that you miss when it's available. We're looking into finding another website where we can put all the videos and audio up at one time, and you can review the whole class. But at least you can, if you miss a week, you can go back 2 weeks later and get the one that you missed. So with that, though, with the intelligent design, just in a nutshell, here's what I did last week. First of all, I argued that the evidence for design is the one, whereas from the Bible, we assume the burden of proof, to prove that the Bible is a revelation of God. We appeal to miracles, prophecy, the quality of the teaching, and many different things, the textual integrity, that it's reliable, to show that the Bible really is trustworthy and is a revelation from God. But I'm arguing that when it comes to the design issue, the burden of proof is on the atheist. Because I gave you several examples last week. The design in the universe is everywhere. It's the evident design in the universe is everywhere. So the burden of proof is on the atheist. Because as William Dembski has argued in his book, The Design Inference, whenever we encounter evidence of design anywhere else in existence, we infer an intelligence was behind that, and that happens in archaeology, it happens in criminal science, it happens on every level. So when we encounter the kind of design that we find in nature, the natural inference is intelligence. And I said that the only real argument that the atheists have against that intelligent design is their belief in chance mutation working in conjunction with natural selection, that nature will select out that which is not fit to survive, and that there are chance mutations. It's not directed, it's not planned, it just sort of happens. But some of those mutations, changes in an organism that are then passed down to descendants, some of them work to the favor of that organism to survive when there's a change in the environment, and the other ones die off. And so through this incrementally slow, infinitesimal, but going on for ages and billions of years process, you end up with such change that it gives you everything that you see, all of the multiple, incredibly diverse forms of life that we find on this planet. Now that, at the face of it, that sounds fantastic. That, why would you believe that instead of just believing that it was designed by a creator? But people do, because they're looking for a natural explanation for everything. All right, so I didn't even though I could have tackled that, could have argued that there isn't the fossil evidence for it, that there is no known mechanism for this kind of wide divergence from one species being able to change into another. I could have argued against Darwinian evolution, but I didn't even go there last week. I refuted it by going prior to that. If the only answer they have for the design in the universe is natural selection, let's go before natural selection existed, which is prior to the existence of organic life. And so I argued for the fine-tunedness of the universe, the impossibility to have all the right conditions for life in nature that we have here. That, just statistically, that everything would be set and tuned for life the way that it is, just couldn't happen. And then I went and I looked at the beginning of the original cell. They believe that all life goes back to one single cell. Well, how did this cell get there? It needs to have a genetic code. It needs to have proteins. It needs to have DNA. It needs to have a DNA code. How did all that happen? And I referred you to the recently published book by Stephen C. Meyer, Signature in the Cell, which is an excellent book. And this will convince you. It's just virtually impossible. It would be like coming up with a computer code, a really more, like Bill Gates has acknowledged, DNA code is more sophisticated than any computer code that's been written. And Rick here is his whole career has been in working with computers and computer code. And he was one person who wasn't worrying when Y2K happened, because he understood everything that had been done to prevent some big catastrophe. So you could talk to him about how complex computer code is. But DNA code, just to have the right sequence of, because it's like a digital information that's being passed on to program what is going to be reproduced, it's just, there's no way that all that could have arranged. And that's for the most simple singular-celled organism. So without even going into debating natural design, the evidence, it was like I gave the example that was given by Robin Collins of throwing a dart all the way across the universe and hitting, your target. I mean, that was the odds of all of these things aligning the way they did to allow for life. So atheists like to think that evolution has relieved them of the design argument, but it really hasn't. And even though they were able to produce amino acids in the laboratory in the 1950s, and everybody was optimistic, they thought that we now understand how life formed, they haven't been able to go beyond that. In fact, the more they've tried, the more difficult it's become. The more the human genome was studied, the more they realized how complex it is and how impossible it is for all these things to just come about on their own. So those are the arguments for the intelligence of design, for the design of the universe, intelligence. Now, what I want to look at today is what for me is even more powerful than the cosmological argument and the teleological argument. To me, this is incontrovertible proof for the existence of God. And that is the anthropological argument, or humanity itself. The way that we are constituted, the way that we are and have to live our lives, is such a strong argument against naturalism, against atheism and materialism. And for, really, when you look at our nature and the things that our nature suggests about reality or imply, you really end up with a God very much like the God of the Bible, needing to exist in order to account for the way that we are. And this is an area where atheists really have to deny reality, have to live as though theism, the belief in a personal, infinite, transcendent, holy God, is what reality really is. They have to put aside their atheism and live their lives as if God was real and there, grounding things. And so this is what I was saying, that if you can't live consistently according to your belief, that should be a strong wake-up call that it does not correspond to reality. And really, it's from the standpoint of testing worldviews, it's the only way you can test it. And if you can't live according to your belief, you should jettison that belief and find a belief that you can live according to. And so for me, one of the really strongest arguments for Christianity is that we can live consistently with it 24/7. It fits who and what we are. And we don't have a problem whatsoever living it out. To me, that's a strong argument for Christianity. So let's just look at this. Now, what is man and why art thou mindful of him, the psalmist said. What makes us stand out? What makes us unique? I think people generally have a sense that we are unique. Now, yes, we're bipedal, we walk on 2 feet, and we have opposable thumbs, and so we can use tools and so forth. But I think a lot of animals might argue that they are more fit for survival, and according to the evolutionists and the atheists, survival is the one dominant value. It's the one driving force in nature, and yet it could be argued that, the cockroach really is the best adapted to survive. And in fact, I remember the movie Wall-E, which I thought was really cute, and life on Earth had become uninhabitable, and so people went off into space somewhere, and the only thing that was still on the Earth, along with Wall-E the robot, was this cockroach. So if survivability is the only thing, then why are we the most advanced people? But obviously, our own sense of ourselves contradicts the idea that simply being able to survive is the only value. We have a sense of our greatness, okay? And even the atheists, one of probably the major movement of atheism in Western culture, aside from Marxism, would be humanism. And humanism celebrates humanity, okay? Humanity is great. Let's celebrate the arts. Let's celebrate science. Let's celebrate philosophy. We are our own best hope. Yay, humanity. That's what humanism is, okay? But these are atheists that are saying that. They have no basis for that view, you see. But yet they would agree with us, really. They have to. That our capacity for intelligence, for reason, our capacity for morality, even though we don't always fulfill our capacity, but instead fail in the moral area, and that's true throughout human history, wherever you look, yet we are all aware of the great examples of courage, selflessness, the people that, we think of the Holocaust as the ultimate example of human evil, but then there are also the examples of those brave people who were not even Jews, who hid Jews and protected them during the Holocaust at the risk of their own lives. And everybody chokes up when we hear about stories like that, because it's speaking of something noble, something that's greater than just chemicals and bones and flesh, something that's greater than just survival. If survival is the ultimate driving value, then these people were fools. They risked their own survival. They were regressive on the evolutionary scale. They were risking their own survival just to help somebody else. How does that make sense? And it's not even their own people. You might say, well, they're Jews helping Jews. No, these were Dutch people, Polish people, people who had no survival stake in the Jews. If the Jews were wiped out, they might find it easier to succeed in business, but yet they were going out of their way to save them. And atheists choke up at these stories, those that have hearts, So there's something about humanity at its best that refutes evolution. And we operate, there's no way you can get out of the fact that we are moral beings. Whether you're good or bad, you're still moral. You still have a conscience, you still have a sense of honesty and dishonesty, justice and injustice, of goodness and evil, love and hatred, all of these qualities. And we are inescapably moral. And I've researched many different kinds of religious cults, and I've researched the Satanists, and who's tried to invert morality. And they invert the Ten Commandments, and everything is put into a negative cast. But for them, as they think of it, that's good. In other words, being bad is good. This is the right thing to do. You can't escape. Even if you're a Satanist trying to deny morality, then that becomes your morality, because we are inescapably moral beings. We live by this, and we live with a sense of reason and logic. We're not always moral. We're often immoral, and we're not always reasonable. We're often illogical. But there is, it's not like Aristotle invented the laws of logic. He identified pre-existing laws, and that's why it was so powerful, and it's lasted to the present and never weakens, because logic is something that we are aware of, we become aware of. Morality is something we become aware of. We don't discover goodness. We didn't sit down and let's come up with moral traits just to entertain ourselves or just to give our lives a little more meaning. I got an idea. Mercy. It's like this. You see somebody hurting, and maybe they're in a situation where they got themselves in this mess, but you feel this thing, I'll call it compassion. You feel this compassion for them, and you want to help them. No, we didn't invent these things. They pre-existed before us. We simply identified or discovered them. We were born into a world where these things already existed. The laws of logic, morality. Okay, now for the atheist, you have to answer the question, where did these things exist? If the nature of the universe is material, and there is no spiritual realm, and there is no purpose to life, but it accidentally happened through a chance, a fortuitous coming together of, chemicals and so forth, and a lightning strike, and then it just this one cell, somehow it came together with all of the necessary ingredients juxtaposed in the right relationship, and it just happened to get struck by lightning, and it became alive, and then somehow this one little cell managed to survive and replicate. Already, wow, and if you believe that, there's also a guy in a red suit that lives in the North Pole. It gets into the realm of fantastic. But okay, if that were true, if the one cell came together and it just happened to survive, and then all the diversity of life, it was not an intention or a plan, a design, but it just happened to, and it happened to survive, and so life just got steamrolling on through the drive to survive, and so this is how we found ourselves here. Well, then, where did these moral qualities come from? In a world where there is nothing but material. Where did even the laws of logic come from? Where did the concept of purpose come from in a purposeless universe? Where did all these abstract, non-physical concepts that we have no choice but to live our lives by, and indeed they are the things, not our physical structure, our bipedalism, or our opposable thumbs. What gives our life meaning is these non-physical qualities, and the atheists, the humanists themselves agree with this. They celebrate these things. So if these are the things that give us meaning and define us and make us unique from the rest of the animal world, because you don't see even apes or dolphins, the most intelligent non-human creatures. You don't see them, writing books on logic. You don't see them teaching morality. They're more instinctual beings. It's they're programmed to behave certain ways, okay? But humans have the ability to set ourselves back and look at things and identify them and understand them and appreciate them. And that should result, like Corinne and I are watching something we have on DVR right now on the sycamore tree in Africa that has just life, so many different layers of life living on this tree. And you go in and you find these parasites that are living off of other lights, and it's all working together to perpetuate the tree and to perpetuate the whole life community. And then you even have parasites upon the parasites, and just the further you go, you see, just an incredible design to the whole thing. But all of that, all of that is happening according to instinct. Okay, but human beings, we have the ability to look at that and go, wow. Now, the Bible says man was created in God's image and in that sense is unique from the rest of creation. Well, doesn't that make sense then that we would be able to look at what he created and appreciate it? And so it would seem like God would want what he did to be appreciated by somebody. The rest of the animals are just busy fulfilling their natures, and they're not being blessed out of their socks by realizing the grand design. But we are, and this is why, my love of, I'm a nature lover, so is Korean, and it's very much a spiritual thing for me. It's very much a part of my relationship with God. I just love to see what he did it and then go, wow, Lord, this is great, and so that is the proper response. But it's the perversity of human nature to say, wow, that is wonderful. Look what evolution did. And this is what the very PBS documentary I reference, and it's typical on PBS and it's typical virtually everywhere, give evolution the glory, for great things it has done, and so you can see how what Paul is talking about in Romans 1, having the evidence of God within them, for it is evident through the things that he has made. They defiled themselves, they debased themselves, they worshipped and served the creation rather than the creator. They suppressed the truth in unrighteousness. In other words, out of a sinful nature, a desire to live a life contrary to God's will, let's use our intellectual powers to suppress the evidence for God and instead live out our sinfulness and just explain it all without reference to God. Well, that's idolatry. We are glory-giving beings. We are worshiping beings. It's part of our nature. If we're not worshiping God, we're worshiping Tiger Woods, and then we have a terrible disappointment. We're worshiping, a car, and then it gets pulled. It gets pulled from the market due to the crash. I'm trying to think of the. Well, Toyota, of course, but I'm thinking of not the Hummer. A lot of people worshipped the Hummer. Well, now it's going out of circulation. So we worship fallible objects because we got to worship something. So what we're looking at here is human nature in the image of God. You can either worship that which is worthy of worship because it's perfect, all-powerful, infinite in every way, good in every way, and is your creator, the one who put everything here, and giving him the glory, or instead you're worshiping, like Paul says in Romans 1, four-footed creatures, fallible things. And so this is the human nature. So for the atheist has to answer, where did these concepts come from in a accidental material world that has no spiritual realm? Are you saying that justice and righteousness and truth only had no existence whatsoever in the universe, and only came about when our cranial capacity evolved to a certain extent to where we could think these abstract thoughts, and then we just entered into a delusion of believing that these things are true? Well, that's what, Richard Dawkins says we're driven by the memes. In other words, we're just looking to survive, and morality and religion are things we've just concocted as survival strategies because it helps to bind our communities together, and so everything is really about me, but I'll help you if I think it helps me kind of thing, and so it trivializes morality. And they try to say, oh, atheism has a basis for morality. We have an article coming out in the next issue of the Christian Research Journal on morality without God, which is very compelling. And I want to recommend that to you. It's in the very next, well, it's not in the very next because the very next issue hasn't come out yet, but it's the one I'm editing right now, which is going to be volume 33, number 3. You ought to get a hold of that because it will give you a lot along the lines of what I'm talking about right here. But, the problem is that these are simply the brute facts of the universe, that we are living in a moral universe, and that morality has no place to find itself in a materialistic universe. And because we are moral beings, if you don't believe in God, then you have nothing absolute, nothing infinite, nothing perfect to ground morality in. And so you've got to say there is no objective absolute morality, but morality is relative. It is relative to what I believe and what you believe, or it's relative to what my culture values and your culture values. But that is a dead-end street to go down, because you cannot escape the argument that if morality is determined by culture, then those Germans who were trying to protect themselves against the incursions of the Jews into the higher strata of the economy of their culture, and who were trying to protect the purity of their Norse, their Aryan genetic strain, in their culture, it was the right survival thing to do to exterminate the Jews. Let's take care of the Jewish problem once and for all. Okay, now very few secular humanists who tend to be liberals and would be more sympathetic toward Marxism than Nazism, if it's sympathetic at all, not that all are Marxists by any means, but they would be left-leaning or radical left in some cases. They're not going to like to be equated with the Nazis, and yet they have no basis for condemning what the Nazis believed. And I remember Dr. John Warwick Montgomery, who was good friends with Dr. Walter Martin. He made the argument that, or he pointed out that at the Nuremberg trial, when the Nazis were tried for their war crimes, their attorneys were savvy to the fact that the very people that were prosecuting them, the European nations and America, that in their universities, these ideas of cultural relativity were being taught. And so they appealed to their own teaching, their own morality, to say, how can you condemn us for simply doing what we in our culture believe is the right thing to do? And there was no refutation of that. Because there is an inner sense of morality that we have, that the Bible says in Romans chapter 2, that God has inscribed it on our heart. And our consciences either excuse or approve the things that we are doing. And so this sense of morality just simply can't be explained. And no one can live consistently with the idea that there is no morality. I'm just going to give a demonstration of that. Rick, do you have your BlackBerry? Can I take a look at it? Thank you. I've been, I work at home and I have my own computer and I can connect to the internet anytime I want to, and I've got my own camera, and I don't like watching TV on small screens and so forth. So I've never felt that I needed, and I like privacy. I don't like to have to be on call all the time. So I've never felt that I needed a BlackBerry till we had our company this weekend. And I've just noticed that there are advantages, to having these little devices. I mean, we went out to the Loggerhead Sanctuary yesterday, and they were taking videos of them. And wow, this one little device does all these things. And so, I think I would like one of those. Thank you, Rick. I appreciate that. Now, here's the thing about that. Let's say Rick was an atheist, okay? And he says, but wait a minute, I worked, for several weeks to be able to make enough money. It's my blood, sweat, and tears that went into purchasing that BlackBerry. You didn't do anything from it. That is rightfully mine. Well, then I could just say to Rick the atheist, that's your morality. That's your view on things. But reality is relative, and in my view of morality, the whole problem with humanity today is this materialistic obsession and attachment, and the continual battle for more and more things, and people, squeezing each other out. And I see that, you've been using this a lot, and I think that you got a problem with it. I think that you're too attached to it. And whereas me, because I'm so non-materialistic, I'll be able to use it to advantage without getting the same obsession. I won't have to stay up late at night working this thing. So I'm going to relieve you of it and take it, because, nobody ever declared on Mount Sinai, "Thou shalt not steal." That's just a human convention. And, there is no ultimate morality. I'm not going to have to be answerable for this. So thank you, Rick. I really appreciate your handing that to me, your trust in me. And I'm going to, even though you think I betrayed that trust, in the long run, you're going to agree, that this was the right thing for me to do. Well, you can give more extreme... You can give more extreme examples of that. In my book, A Crash Course on the New Age Movement, I give the example of someone who is a pedophile, and argues that he's just simply showing love to the children, and on what basis do you say that this is wrong? Examples that can really jar us. But the reality is that all of us live with belief, basically, that the Ten Commandments are true, and that it is wrong to steal. It is wrong to be unfaithful. It is wrong to murder, and it is wrong to slander, to bear false witness against your neighbor. We just know these things are true. But if morality is relative, that we don't have any basis for that. It's only if morality is absolute that we have a basis for saying that certain things are wrong. And that's what society needs as a solid foundation, because there is a tendency toward evil, sin, corruption, and we need a strong, solid, compelling basis for morality to counteract that. Not some wishy-washy, true for me, true, false for you kind of thing. And so humanity's very nature says there's got to be a basis for morality out there. But if there is a morality, an absolute morality, do you think it just exists out there, floating like there's truth? It's circulating Orion right now. No, I mean it's got to be located in ultimate reality. And ultimate reality, the best explanation for that is that it would need to be personal, not just some infinite consciousness, because when we look at pantheism, we're going to see that their God doesn't solve the problem of humanity in the universe either, or the problem of morality, because their God doesn't have morals. It's just an abstract, attribute-less void. All right, so you can't locate morality in the pantheist God. You can't locate morality in a material universe. The only place you can locate it in is an infinite, personal, moral, that's why I call him holy, I think that's the best word to sum up his morality, God. And so in that sense, then morality is what God is like. He made us in his image, so therefore we are moral beings, but we are not God, so we're accountable to him, and if we disobey his law, then we abuse our moral capacity and we sin, and there are consequences for that, death and suffering and everything else. So all that makes sense. It fits the way we are. We can live according to this, but the atheist cannot live without morality and without a concept of something that is absolute, and so they have to live as though God is true, even though they deny his existence. Well, they therefore, on all three of these counts, these three tests, atheism fails the only test it can really be subjected to until you get to the point where you confirm that the Bible is a revelation of God, and then, of course, you refute it from the Bible. But just on the basis of logic, without even yet getting to the Bible, atheism fails all three tests. The test of being internally consistent, test of being consistent with the world as we find it, the test of being consistent with human nature as we find it. Okay, so it's just wide open at this point for questions and answers on either this topic or any topic. I'm playing Bible Answer Man here. So, George.
Yeah, would you mind touching on the fact that, okay, you mentioned the fact that creation proves the goodness of God.
Excuse me for a second, George. I accidentally touched a... I don't know whether it can be redeemed. I guess it's going to have to end there. At least we got the whole lecture in.
Yeah, I think it went all the way back.
Yeah, so we got the whole lecture in. It's okay. And it's also going to be on the video, including the questions and answers. So go ahead, George. I'm sorry for that interruption.
Just touch on the fact that creation proves or shows the goodness of God, but others show or point to the fact that it's a bloody creation, a brutal creation. And of course, you have two camps within Christianity. The camp that says, okay, these are the effects of the fall. The other camp that says, no, these things occur before the fall. Would you mind touching on that?
Well, I will touch on it very briefly now because I'm going to actually deal with these things later on. At this point, when we're dealing with the argument for intelligent design, it's very interesting because the chief argument against intelligent design that you really, what it all boils down to with the atheists and with the evolutionists is a theological argument. And that is that they don't think God would create a world where there is the suffering and things that they think might be more efficient than they are. So really, they're taking issue with the nature of the design and not the fact of design. In other words, they would like to have seen the design be differently. But now they're putting themselves in the position of God, which is a position that we should have enough humility to recognize we can't put ourselves into. So I would just say, yeah, I mean, I will address when we get to the evidence, we've narrowed it all down to theism, and then we narrowed the theism options down to Christianity, and then we get to, after we've looked at the evidence for Christianity, we will then look at the problems Christianity has to answer. One of them is evil and human suffering, and then at that point I'm going to go into a full exposition on what you're asking me to talk about here. In terms of why is there the suffering in the world, and a Christian answer for that. But at this point, it just needs to be pointed out that because the design is not the way you would have done it, does not mean that there isn't design. The design is manifest either way. So at this point, we just need to recognize that their argument is actually a theological and not a scientific argument, that it's not their preference for their belief of how God would do it. Well, that's not the issue here. The issue is that there is an demonstrable intelligent design. So, okay, somebody else?
In that respect, free will, God created us with free will, causes a lot of our problems.
Right.
But yet, that's what God wanted to do, is make it so that we would love Him out of our own choice, rather than being robots. He
Right.
could have created us all robots if He wanted to.
Right.
Will of Wallace.
Well, I wanted to share a little humorous anecdote about Walter Martin. This guy was, Cindy's father. Very profound influence upon my life. One of my friends became a Jehovah's Witness, and so I started reading up on Jehovah's Witnesses, and I read his book, The Kingdom of the Cults, and I read about this place called Christian Research Institute in Wayne, New Jersey, and I thought, oh boy, would that be the place for me to work? But how will I ever get to New Jersey? Well, God brought Muhammad the mountain to Muhammad. In other words, God brought CRI to Southern California, and that's where I've been ever since. Not Southern California, but CRI. And so this man who just demonstrated to me, first of all, that we can be confident about our faith. He was bold about his faith. He understood what the opposing camps, whether it was the cults or the atheists or whatever, believed. And he understood intimately his own faith, and he had a cutting-edge logic where he could refute he debated Madeline Murray O'Hair. He debated all of the major atheists at the time in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And they were afraid of him. He wasn't afraid of them. I mean, he was just a great champion of the Christian faith, who demonstrated the power that Christians don't have to run away from contrary evidence, that there are answers and reasons for faith, and yet he was such a powerful contender that people thought, well, this man is scary, or he's divisive, he's judgmental, or whatever. But if you actually knew him, he was a teddy bear. He was just an incredible. He had these big bear hugs, and he took a personal interest in Corinne and me, and he was just, anybody who knew him just knew that this guy really was a loving person. But he was such a formidable intellect that it was funny when you got to know him, because you may have heard about how Einstein would just sort of he'd be solving all of these problems, mathematical and physics problems, and he would forget to go to the bathroom, or he was totally, he'd be walking across the street and almost get hit by a car. Well, Walter Martin was, when it came to the earthly realm, it was really funny. Cindy, I just had to share this with Cindy. Told me this story yesterday that. When she started telling me this, I thought, oh, this is not going to end well. The family was going on a vacation, and they had all these suitcases, and Walter tied all the suitcases to the top of the car for the family's vacation. I thought, Walter tying suitcases to the top of the car. Well, they get out on the highway, the freeway, and all of a sudden they hear, "Flook," and then they hear, one suitcase after another is flying off the car into the freeway. And so they're pulling over, and there he is, trying to grab up the individual clothes, dodging cars. Oh, that was hysterical. And, Jesus said that, it's enough for a disciple to be as his teacher. The disciple cannot be greater than the teacher. So I have to confess, and those of you, I told you I'm very spacey guy, and the more you get to know me, the more you'll realize I'm a very one-track person, and I'm absent-minded. I don't think about other things. So I had an experience. We used to live on the top of Palomar Mountain in San Diego County, and we would commute to Orange County to CRI a couple days a week, and then I worked at home the rest of the time. Well, I would often put things on the top of the car and then drive off. Well, I put, we took off. I put everything in the car. I thought I'd put everything in the car, but apparently I'd left something on the top. So we had driven all the way from Palomar Mountain to Orange County, which is a 2-hour drive, and I'm stopping at a red light, and this guy honks me from behind, and he comes out and he hands me my Bible. And that's the Bible I have right here. This is a sturdy Bible. So, anyway, I just thought I would share all of that with you, because it's just neat when you get to know some of these great men of God, and you realize, that all of us are kept humble by the Lord.
I also had the distinction of hearing Walter Martin twice in California several years ago, and at John MacArthur Church. And I consider the Kingdom of the Coast to be a seminal education for me, learning about the distinctions of Christianity and the non-Christian traditions. It was really an eye-opening experience to listen to him here. And he just rattled it off. The wealth of knowledge is amazing.
Photographic memory really
Absolutely.
helped. I could have used that for sure.
I was completely enthralled.
Yeah. Okay.